Welcome, everyone. This is the Buddhist Yoga and Medicine podcast, and I'm very honored to have senior mentor and Vajrayana teacher Loppon Yudron Wangmo. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, James.
Thank you. So, for those who are just becoming more familiar with Vajrayana Buddhism, the term Loppon sometimes refers to the Sanskrit Acharya. So Loppon Yudron Wangmo was authorized in 2017 by Lama Pema Dorje, Master Yogi, in the Nyingma and Dudjom Tersar tradition. Before we move into today's very important topic, we were going to discuss contemporary Buddhist masters and women in Buddhist tradition, specifically the Dudjom Tersar. But can you tell us a little bit about what is the Dudjom Tersar?
Yes. Well, I want to start even before that by saying what is the point of the Dudjom Tersar? The point is that sentient beings are suffering. There's never, we never have peace. We never have contentment, satisfaction. And we think we have this delusion of a I or self, and we're always looking for how to, counterintuitively, we always seem like we're looking for how to make our situation better and get what we want, push away what we don't want, but it just gets worse and worse. So that whole process begets suffering itself. And Dudjom means subduing demons. And the big demon is this sense of I or self that is just like Lama Tarchin used to say, it's like a piece of I. And in order to find true peace and satisfaction and lasting awakening, you need to expand out this little piece of I to become like vast, like the sky. So that's what the point of why great beings like Dudjom Lingpa, from the 19th century, Dudjom Rinpoche from the 20th century, Jigjo Yeshe Dorje, and then from the 21st century, Dudjom Sangye Pema Shepa, why they came into this world only to benefit beings, only to help guide sentient beings out of, away from suffering towards lasting peace. And so that they themselves can become able to benefit others in the same way. So the 19th century, this amazing, really unparalleled and bigger than life figure, Dudjom Lingpa, emerged in Golok, in remote part of Tibet. And he was born, and immediately, as soon as he was born, he had all sorts of visionary experiences of being nurtured by dakinis, taught and guided by unseen beings. In a wisdom way, and without very little formal Dharma education, and very and not going through the familiar hoops of practice that we engage in as ordinary sentient beings. He was able to contact Guru Rinpoche, contact the source of wisdom, and bring forth practices that were completely, validatable, completely authentic, completely in keeping with the Buddhist teaching, but meant for this time, for this modern times, and to help us, a set of practices and a set of teachings to help us really awaken. And this continued in his next life as Dudjom Tersar Dorje, who again was revealing these treasures there called terma, of new practices being born from his wisdom mind stream that help us and guide us through the correct way to practice Dharma, and the most effective and efficient way, which we need more and more. So our Dudjom Tersar tradition can be said, that topic can be appreciated in two ways. One is this lineage of practices, which is very much alive and promulgated by living teachers in the present. And then there is the sort of institutions grew up, a few of them, around the to hold and transmit the teachings of Dudjom Rinpoche and Dudjom Wangmo. So they exist in Asia and very important as support to the practice. But what I'm speaking about here is the practice tradition. You know, that's what I have a connection to. And so the Dudjom Tersar involves practices of self-imagining as deity, recognizing oneself as deity, your pure wisdom qualities, and bringing those forth. Many of those practices, including Dakini practices such as Khandro, the heart essence of the Dakini, and then Troma Nakmo, the fierce Black Mother, who there's a vast teaching cycles of practices associated with both of those Dakinis. Yeah.
I should preface this also for listeners. Loppon Yudron is also the director of Mayum Mountain, and Mayum Mountain also preserves the Dudjom Tersar tradition. Is it primarily the Dakini practices, or also the Vajrakilai, Puchi Repong, or other practices as well?
Well, my major focus as a teacher is because of what I've been asked to teach by lineage holders, is Khandro cycle, Troma Nakmo cycle, and Soki Tuktik, because Gurpache is so important. And as a co-practitioner, sometimes we older practitioners gather together and practice Vajrakalaya together. But my teachings aren't focused on Vajrakalaya at this time, nor Turjitrola, which is the fifth of the most important sadhana practices of the Tersar tradition. Yeah, and in general, my focus is on like small groups and getting helping people transform their own consciousness through this. I want to say through changing their minds, you know, changing their direction in life through the foundational practices and sadhana primarily.
Loppon, this question comes to me often whenever I'm in a Dharma context. Many ask what female lineage teachers and influences do you have? They're very concerned. I listened to a somewhat recent YouTube discussion you offered about 2 years ago, and you were giving advice to women coming into contemporary Dharma and Vajrayana. And it really dovetails with this need and concern. And I'm wondering what you can share in terms of the value of honoring the sacred feminine, also highlighting contemporary women wisdom teachers in the Dudjom Tersar lineage.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we have to say that there right now, well, on the one hand, we're all in a period of grieving, having lost our lineage leader, Dudjom Sangye Shepa, at a young age. So it is, in a way, a dark time, only 2 years out since that horrible day when we learned of his passing. And then on the other hand, the tears are coming. On the other hand, what I notice is a lot of Himalayan women have taken up the practice, particularly of Troma Nakmo. And it's become a source of, I know empowerment might be a word that they might not like, but a source of inspiration and a source of a feeling of finding their heart practice for a lot of women in Asia. And it's really hot and on fire right now. You know, you have the image of Troma being herself, you know, with exuding flames. But I understand that the nuns at Larangar where they are indeed creating teachers, Dharma teachers of all kinds, Kenmo, scholars. But the wonderful thing about Larangar, the major center of learning in Tibet, is that they don't just only study. They're always splitting their time between practice and study. And they are very hardcore there. You go there and you take off your Kempo or Kemo program, and you only have like 1 or 2 days off the whole year. And you're practicing half your time studying, half your time practicing for many years. So these women have, I've heard, taken up the practice of Troma Nakmo, and are practicing together in large groups of nuns. And so that's really amazing. And those nuns are putting out themselves, are creating a huge encyclopedia, have created, of the lives of previous female masters of Tibetan Buddhism, teachers, and so forth, in many, many volumes. This gets larger and larger from what I understand it. And this has been very important work for them. They've wanted to undertake. And so I always imagine, and I'd love to, it's restricted there right now, but I'd love to go practice with them and see, was one the seed for the other? Was it the writing the biographies of these women, the inspiration to take up the practice of Troma Nakmo? Or was it that, by writing biographies, I mean compiling? And then, or was it the other way around? Because they were Troma Nakmo practitioners, were they inspired to write this story? It didn't embolden them. So, Troma Nakmo, the one remarkable thing about the Nundro, or foundation practice for women, is that the guru is the Trikaya Dakinis, particularly envisioned as Vajraparahi, with Kuntazama on her, above her head, Dharmakaya Dakini. And you yourself are red Troma Nakmo, which is pretty indistinguishable from Vajravarahi. So you're meeting each other, empowered, and this is red is the color of power and magnetism and so forth. And you're really facing a woman facing women. And how often does that happen in Dharma practice? And of course, there are many great male practitioners of Troma Nakmo, but this has been, I think it has a kindling effect, on women in their lives and in their activities. And likewise, the Sherpa Gampa in around Bodhanath. And this is like something that unless you go there, unless you practice there, you don't even know these women are doing this. But there's a bunch of Sherpa and maybe other women practicing very seriously. Every month they get together and practice the Troma Tsok, I think the medium length, which is quite an undertaking together. Many, many women. I stumbled onto them which will sound kind of silly to them, but I didn't know they existed. In 2016, I was there doing the Troma Sokpo and the 100,000 Soks accumulation with Dudjom Sangyapema Shepa on the stupa, flanks of the stupa, Bodhanath. And I'm walking around trying to find my seat, and suddenly I come to a whole flank with, I don't know, 100 women there or something, at least 80, I would say. Maybe more, I don't know how many women, countless. All in their proper, wearing their robes, with their Tibetan pages, reading their Tibetan pages. And they had leaders, female leaders up in front along the front row, dignitaries, female dignitaries. And then, so we had all 4 groups represented, the male and female monastics, in one section, the male Nakpas, yogis in one section, and then the female yoginis in one section. And it was one of the high points of my life to practice with them. I just come out of some Tibetan learning, trying to learn to speak Tibetan and failing, but at that time I knew how to speak a little, and I tried to talk to the women. And I found out they were not speaking, the Central Tibetan dialect. They were probably speaking the Sherpa dialect. And I couldn't understand a word they were saying. They couldn't understand what I was saying, but they were so kind to me and gave me a seat and so forth. And then, of course, as a group at Sopema, always with Ani Bumchung, who's a great older practitioner up there in the caves. They've been there for decades, first with under the support of Lama Wangdor, and now other people, Karmalunda Rinpoche and others support them there. And it just goes on and on. We have also, Sani Bumchung, very good. And I got to meet her during 2016 also up there. And she's not only, she spent decades of her life literally bringing food up there onto the mountaintop for those women, supporting them in every way like a real bodhisattva. And their specialty is trauma nakmo. And it just, I feel like it just goes on and on. We have them now. There's a nunnery at Orissa in India where Dudjom Rinpoche's refugee community was established originally. There's a monastery there, and there's also a nunnery in the I think they're in the Nampa Kunsang tradition, the upper tradition of trauma practice. That's a long story. So there's different threads of trauma communities and so forth. So this is really going places. And I haven't seen any female lamas like put forth in that way. Culturally, that would be a hurdle. I know that certainly Chaton Piche's daughter, Semo,
Saraswati?
Saraswati, very sorry, Semo Saraswati is certainly authorized to teach these practices and confer these practices, in addition to the practices of her predecessor. But and then in the Khandro Tutik, Lama Yeshe Wangmo, this is the peaceful aspect of Dakini. Lama Yeshe Wangmo for decades has been an authorized lineage holder under Lama Tarchin Rinpoche and Dongsu Tinli Northern Rinpoche, certainly by extension, of the Khandro Tutik, hard essence of Dakini practices. So it's a happening thing. And then other women I want to mention are Western women who have been authorized as lamas. In addition to Lama Wangmo, we have Sera Khandro, who's a great scholar. I would say, she might not say that, and a translator, excellent oral translator and written translator, and again, an exponent of the Trauma Nakmo tradition. And lesser known figures, perhaps, Dechen children, Lama Dao's American wife, and then the Achaitud Lamas, they hold the trauma tradition and the Vajrakalaya tradition from Chagrin Rinpoche, so some of them may be promulgating the trauma, I don't know. And then Lama Ingmar Pema Dechen is not very well known. She's an older woman in Mississippi. And she's doing the trauma soak every month, I know, and she's an authorized lama. And I am doing my best here, as here in rural California, bringing forth these practices. To me, the most important practice is Sangundro, the foundational practices, whichever Nundro you practice, because especially in the West, because we are not from a culture where Buddhism is indigenous. And we really need to change our minds in ways we don't even know how the society has penetrated our minds. There's obvious things, and then there's subtle ways that we need to redirect. And so we can have a lot of misunderstandings. It's important to go slowly and carefully through the foundational practices. And both Khandro Tuktik and Troma Nakmo have their own foundational practices, but any Nundro will do, including the short one for working people. We have four Nundros in Dudjom Tersar, and for good reason. This is emphasized in our tradition. So we really want to redirect our minds away from samsara, cyclic existence. We don't even know what that means, initially. Really, it means a really 180-degree turn away from how we were raised and all the values we had of our society and everything we're surrounded by. So it really takes a kind of maverick, independent energy outside, especially if you don't live somewhere where you can practice, say, with Pema Usaling or with the Padmasambhava Institute, organization in upstate New York, or I feel like, oh yeah, Yeshe Ningpo. Then you have support if you happen to be on the coasts. There's some support from Sangye Khandro up in Tashicholing in Oregon. But many people now are coming to contact with Dharma for the first time through the internet during the pandemic, and they're used to receiving teachings online, and it's more difficult. It's one thing to say, oh, doing prostrations is hard, but more hard is changing our minds, really, and being maybe alone in our families, or if we're lucky enough to have a supportive partner, a society and our job and so forth, where the values of Dharma are not present. And I salute, if you're watching this and you're a hardcore practitioner, is really changing their mind, turning their mind towards the Dharma. I salute you. I applaud you. It's beautiful. And so let me see now. So I didn't, I think, James, the direction we know we would go now here is to talk about the great lamas of the past, the female lamas of the past in the Tersar tradition.
Yes, please.
And so the progenitor of all the female lamas of the past is Yeshe Sogyo. And Yeshe Sogyo was a great practitioner, the first, among the first Tibetan practitioners of students of Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava, who established the Dharma solidly for the first time in Tibet, and like 1,500 years ago. And so, a lot of historical evidence for her existence is missing, but I have faith that she existed based on the oral tradition, and had led a magnificent life, cultivating her every aspect of Dharma with a prodigious memory. She's likened to Saraswati, the goddess of the language, and also to Tara in her great motherly compassion for sentient beings. And she was truly the mother of Tibetan Buddhism. So from her, she was, she continuously, I would say, transmits the teachings of Padmasambhava as a messenger to the minds, waking up the minds of practitioners, especially the people who were Guru Rinpoche's students in his during his historical life, and in whom treasures may have been hidden. And so she wakes that up for them. She attempts to be an intermediary. She is said to have been the one that hid, in the way they put it in the traditional languages, she hid those teachings all over Tibet. And literally, earth treasures are found hidden in rocks and underwater in caves and so forth. And so she did that work miraculously, but more on a more subtle level. She's awakening the minds of, she communicates. So Dudjom Rinpoche, for example, Jigdesha Dorje had a visit from Yeshe Sogyal and a group of her Dakinis when he was a youth down by a river in Pema Ke, where he grew up. And so that's always in the background. It's always a touchstone for all the women who came subsequently. Then we jump forward to Sera Khandro, Dewe Dorje, of the early 20th century. Yes, this is Dr. Rinpoche's statue at his center in Nepal of Sera Khandro. Do you know Sera Khandro because she came under the protection of the abbot of a little tiny, not the Sera monastery, but a little tiny monastery in Golok, known as Sera Monastery. And this This Kempo, the monastic head, later went on to be incarnated as Sogan Rinpoche. And Sogan Rinpoche, Sogan, has been entrusted with Sera Khandro's teachings in the present day by Chatron Rinpoche. So he is very selectively and protectively carrying forth the treasure tradition, her own treasure tradition of Sera Khandro, which blossomed in connection with her profound partnership with Tukudrime Özer in the early 20th century. So she carried her own treasure tradition, but her partner, Tukudrime, was the son of Dudjom Lingpa, a son of Dudjom Lingpa. And they were, I've heard from the oral tradition that this is called, they held what's called the Kamluk, or the Kam style of melodies and ritual and so forth together. And their community, their Tukudrime's community, and of Troma Nakmo. So Troma Nakmo was a central practice for them. And so she certainly was influenced by this practice, and she was authorized lineage holder of the Dudjom Tersar. I believe she gave the empowerments for the Tersar, and also for her husband's Terma tradition, and also for her own Terma tradition. So she was holding 3 traditions. So she was is really one of the most remarkable women in Tibetan history, and she's about to burst forth on the world because finally there's been books that have kind of excerpted her wisdom and her life story. But she wrote an autobiography, and wow, just the idea of being a rural woman and, in Cowtown. I'm not disparaging Gold, but, it's a nomadic pastoral community. And I can't, she began not as a nomad, but in being in Lhasa. And she went to Golok in search of her teacher, following her teacher and her partner, Jim Uzer. But this book was written with a lot of Golok language in it, a lot of Golok slang, and it's very difficult to translate. And Sarah Jacobi was entrusted with this project by Chatron Rinpoche. And she's a professor and a mother in Chicago, I believe, Northwestern, and last I heard. And so she's still working with Golok speakers, lamas, on making sure everything is absolutely right with this large autobiography, and that tells her story, profound story, that I will probably may even supersede Yeshe Sogyal's story, because it's written in her own words, and just amazing. So this is coming forth. An exact publication date, I don't know. She's still working with this right now with Sogan Rinpoche on the manuscript, but this is going on. And because she told us to record her story, and was such a profound, she was another one that was like nurtured by invisible Buddhas, teachers and protectors from early childhood. Because of that, she was influenced everyone connected with Dudjom Lingpa since that time. And so she's kind of considered her tradition and the Dudjom tradition are considered like joined, really connected. And she wrote she wrote down the famous commentary on the Nangjong, refining, what do we call that? Nangjong? Refining appearances, purifying appearances. And a famous visionary text by visionary discovery, treasure discovery by Dudjom Lingpa about Trekchen, Dzogchen cutting through practice. And so she's very connected, interconnected. So, and actually Dudjom Lingpa, because he had a lot of children, I do want to mention that oral tradition, one of his daughters was named Lachin Pimasel, and she was given the responsibility to create or at least refine the melodies for the chit practices, the 4 feasts of chit. So this is, in a way, women's traditions comes down to us from Dudjom Lingpa's daughter. The daughters are barely mentioned, you know. I think Holly Gailey has done some work on that, bringing forth academic papers that, yeah, he did have daughters, I think 4 or more, at least 4. And so oral tradition from a lama who had a relative who's a student of Dudjom Lingpa's, this is where those melodies came from. They're a little different than the main, but harmonious with the main sadhana melodies. So anyway, Dudjom Lingpa had a lot, big family, and he had, and his wives. And then, so now there's hundreds of people, I think, related to Dudjom Lingpa. I'm imagining anyway, because you meet a lot of them in Golok and surrounding areas, and in the refugee community, I'm sure, as well. And among them is Tai Lamo, who is there's 3 roughly contemporary female teachers. Tai Lamo is one of them. This is a great figure, you know, during the think about the situation, you know, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But particularly from 1950, the Chinese communists came into Eastern Tibet and then started incursions. And then by 1960, 59, the whole thing was sewed up. You know, the country was taken over by the communist Chinese. So, and Buddhists were terribly oppressed. So a lot of, in the 60s, a lot of the lamas were in jail or dead, you know. And so the male lamas, and so I sometimes wonder if it isn't like the Second World War for women in the United States. We could think about it that way, that women really came, a few women, and maybe in other traditions as well, we could look at that, rose to prominence because the men were off at war. So the lamas were off in prison or having to flee the country. And some of Dudjom Lingpa's family, who were very well trained in Dharma, who were female, came to the fore. And Tari Lamo, and also use my word finding skills here. Kunsang Wangmo, who's a little snippet of her life, is documented in the wonderful film, which is available on YouTube, Sky Dancer. Yes, this is still Tari Lama. Is it still right?
Yes, pardon.
Yes, that's still Tari Lama. That's wonderful. So, but also there is Kunsang Wangmo, so who was in a different locale, but she was also a part of the Dudjom Lingpa's family, and then Semo Dechen Yudron, who was daughter of Dudjom Rinpoche. So the next incarnation after Dudjom Lingpa was Chuchi Dorje, and that's his daughter who passed away. I'm forgetting her name, Rapima, can't quite remember her name, but he had several daughters. So the subsequent incarnation, there we go, Semo Dechen Yudron. So Semo Dechen Yudron ended up being responsible for Dudjom Rinpoche's center. And I'm forgetting let's see, the name of her center. So it'll come back to me. But
is it Lama Ling?
At Lama Ling in Kongpo. That's right. So in southern Tibet is where Dudjom Rinpoche did establish his teaching seat towards the end of his time in Tibet. And he had to move out of Pimlico for political reasons. And then he just opened up a Pure Land, kind of a sacred space in which is amazing to look at on a map because it looks like the fingers of a hand, the ridges, like 4 or 5 ridges that come together in the center of a giant swirl of mountains that they couldn't have seen, They didn't have Google Maps. You think about it, it looks like a big wave. You should look at that. If you look at that wave in southern Tibet of mountain ranges swirling around, in the very center of that is that beautiful sacred land of Lama Ling. Lama Ling is where one of my key teachers, Lama Tarchin, was trained as one of 4 men who did a 3 retreat directly under Dudjom Rinpoche, Jidriya Dorje there at Lama Ling. So that's a long story, but the important point is in a humble and just not putting herself out there as a major person. She really forwarded her husband's role as Lama. She nonetheless took her power as the daughter of Dudjom Rinpoche to rebuild Lama Ling, and worked with the Communist Party to get it done, make it happen, and it's there today and thriving. So this isn't tremendous, and she was a Brit practitioner, Troma Nakmo. And she also, Troma Nakmo, if you receive the Troma Nakmo empowerment from, for example, Zongso Khyentse Rinpoche, he made a point of going, because she was such a accomplished Troma Nakmo practitioner. Zongso Khyentse Rinpoche made a point of going, he said, of going to Lama Ling into Tibet, I believe, or at least he received it from his auntie. Or he might have received it. She also had a home in Lhasa. So if you receive the trauma empowerment from Zongso Khyentse Rinpoche, which he's given many times, you'll find that his lineage comes from Kunsang Dechen Yudron. No, not Semo Dechen Yudron. So that's beautiful. And so these 3 were going the same, roughly contemporaneous with each other, working while with the really, really bad situation of being terribly, terribly oppressed as Tibetan people and as Buddhists during the Cultural Revolution, and then rebuilding institutions and so forth at the as much as they could of their neighborhood, of their responsibilities, carrying out their responsibilities as lineage holders. And I wanted to say, just going back on Tai Lama, she promulgated her own treasures. She held other lineages, but she was empowered by one of Dudjom Rinpoche's sons, as she and her husband were empowered as lineage holders of the Dudjom Tersar tradition. They gave those empowerments in Wangs. And why am I mentioning that? Because it's rare for women to be in the role of the Vajra Master, giving empowerments, reading transmissions, and instructions. I met a wonderful Nakba from British Columbia named Lama Kalsang. Kalsang received months of training in the Putri Rekpong treasured teachings of Dudjom Rinpoche from Semo Dechen Yudron at Lama Ling. So she was important to the continuance of the lineage. My own, I know people that met her and were warmly invited over to her house in Lhasa. And she would sit there. She was on a slightly raised throne, but she put her husband's throne was a little higher, and very gracious and elegant. So just saying, this lineage has been held by female Vajra masters in the past, and we'll see. I don't know in Asia right now who's really giving the empowerments, the transmissions, and so forth. I know in the United States there are several people. The women I mentioned have been authorized to do that. So let's So it's happening, and something's really happening with trauma in particular, and with, to a lesser extent, maybe, Khandro.
You had used the word in a communication, matrilineal versus some of the history of patrilineal succession of Vajrayana knowledge, wisdom. Um, is there what can what is you have been highlighting many women wisdom teachers, and having the spotlight on these profound exemplars. What can we benefit from in terms of how we're shifting our institutions or the ways that we practice and understand Dharma?
Well, first you have to receive teachings from them, and they're there. You know, you have to make an effort, because part of the Dudjom tradition, and it goes, I think, beyond even the general Tibetan culture, is humility. So putting yourself out there, west or east, in the Dudjom Tersar tradition, is highly frowned upon. So you aren't going to see all the splashy Facebook. You'll see a little, but it's just going to be like a little notice, and you have to pick up on it and go for it. And like Loppon Yudron Wangmo is largely off of social media these days, and you have to find the Gyamasuka Foundation, go to their website, and seek teachings from her. And same Saraswati Bhavan. I think you have to find Kunsang Dechen children. You can Lama Ingmar Pema Dechen. She says, "Oh, I'm old, not doing much." But a lot of people say that kind of stuff. That's part of the humility story. So you have to find her. She's on Facebook. And Sera Khandro, I think I've heard would prefer not to teach, but she's so encouraging. Everybody wants her to teach so much that you have to keep on it and sign up for the Organ Dorje Den, the Tashi Chuling email lists, and make sure you're on it. But this isn't the way things work passively. Traditionally, if you want a teaching, you go and you present a kata, and you make an offering and say, "Please teach me the Troma Nakmo," or please, if you want them as a guru, you have to study them for a really long time and make sure all these women are great, but make sure that they're honorable people. When you talk about going back to how women want to be, have them know about female lineage, and remind me to get back to the forthcoming book translated by Christina Monson of Sera Khandro's World Instructions. But I'm on a roll here that you have to you can choose one of these women as your guru. You can, they're there, but they aren't going to come plop it in your lap. And you can also bug your Dharma centers to invite these women to come teach. They aren't going to force themselves, go around with a PR agent. This isn't going to happen in the Dudjom Tersar tradition. So be assertive. If you say you support women teachers, invite them to submit articles to your magazines. Invite them to teach at your center. Push your lamas to have more women teaching. Sorry, but it's just not going to be that easy. So, but they're there. They're alive and kicking. Go, if you're in Nepal, go find that Sherpa Gompa and ask when the women meet, and go practice with them and find out what's happening. Do they have any women teaching there, or are they relying solely on the Rinpoches, the male Tulkus and Kempos at this point? What's happening with that? And also the Great Translation Project of the Larangar nuns. This is going to be the biggest thing. It's in Tibetan, and there's projects underway. I think maybe Tzadra Foundation is working on this, tremendous, it's a huge translation project to bring that. So it's coming in piece by piece. You'll see little snippets of that work in the Lutzawa's House website with some of the female teachers, such as Sera Khandro, with the late translator Christina Monson's work coming in there. So I have to know here, Christina, was passed away recently after a long struggle with cancer. To the end, working on her projects and her translation, she was on fire with her work, bringing forth the Sera Khandro teachings, and she was working on Dream Özer's biography that was written by Sera Khandro. So I'm not sure who's going to finish that. I'm sure she set that up. But right now, forthcoming from Shambhala is called the I'm forgetting the Tibetan. Anyway, the oral instructions of Sera Khandro. There, she had a volume in her collected works that was like advice she gave to Sheldon, oral instructions, right? And this is coming forth very soon from Shambhala. She finished. She was so happy to finish. She lived long enough to finish it. Can you, there's lots of books. If you go to your Amazon shelf or there's lots of book collections of Buddhist women teachers and sort of their life stories, contemporary women particularly. And there's, there's a whole shelf of books on this subject. But how many of them are the teachings of the women? You see very little of that. What do women have to say to Dharma about the Dharma? Of course, the Dharma is all the same, but what aspects come forward from the women teachers that might have a slightly different focus or might not? We're going to find out soon from the Dakini, wisdom Dakini, Sera Khandro. Just can't wait for that book to come out. Can't wait. So, so it will take some time to figure that out. What is here with the Dudjom Tersar tradition is by nature always going to be promulgated by Tulkus of Dudjom Lingpa and Dudjom Rinpoche, right? So it's always going to have that family aspect and also an incarnational aspect. But it's also always been a partnership. So for the oral tradition, I've also heard that Dudjom Lingpa did soak ceremonies, our bi-monthly group practices, where men and women would practice together, and that was not the norm. The Nakpa centers in Amdo and Eastern Tibet were just men. And I'm not saying that's bad, but it was positive. But the Dudjom tradition has always included women, which is very interesting considering, Dudjom Lingpa's images as a very, very masculine, very warrior-like guy with his sword on his belt. And, times he's said to have raised his sword to, intimidate people and stuff like that. Now this stereotypically masculine Terten came the most empowering practices for women and for men. So let's get into them. It's incredible. And what's the point again? Bringing it back as we circle around. The point is we're going to wake up. There's no reason for the institutions. There's no reason for this. Isn't like a cultural thing that I'm sure it can be done that way, or a kind of a museum of Tibet. Who cares about that? I don't care about that. Sorry. I care about people transforming their minds, liberating their consciousness into deathless wisdom. Wow. Really changing. I've really changed. I'm not enlightened, but these practices are so powerful. I'm a hardly recognizable person, as a person, compared to what I was 20, 30 years ago. In this one lifetime, and I have to acknowledge my kind lamas, to my kind lamas. So I think that's what we're talking about here.
So Loppon Yudron, you've covered quite some territory in terms of contemporary Western teachers, women teachers in the Dudjom Tersar, and also some of the most prominent contemporary wisdom teachers. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today? And I'd also like to bring everyone's attention to Mayum Mountains activities where there are ongoing soaks and teachings. How can everyone get in touch with you also?
Info at Mayum Mountain, MAYUM mountain.org is how you can get in touch with me. And I guess, I'm not so important, but it's a way, what I provide is an interactive environment where people can practice, do our bi-monthly practices together, and have peer support and my support and a lot of, words in the practices. Regularly, there's always something going on. But I would say more broadly, there's something, what's coming up for me is that whatever practice you're doing, love and compassion for all living beings should blossom. So when you're looking for Vajrayana teachers, Dudjom Tersar or any others, that's what you should feel from any teacher. So man, woman, doesn't matter, but those qualities do matter. So it's nice to have a title, and many of the tukus and the khenpos get really fantastic training, and they usually come out really well, But if you don't see love and compassion, then don't go there, So look around, you can explore these women I've talked about, and look at the men and see who is like, Mayum means mother, like holy mother, great mother. But it doesn't have to be a woman that's like a great mother. Lama Tarchin Piche, Lama Pema Dorjin Piche. I'm also a Ningtig fan of Adzam Pela Piche of Tibet. They embody both mother and father, kind and supportive guides. And this will allow you to avoid a lot of baloney, and trouble in your practice if you seek out teachers who just are overflowing with equal love for sentient beings. And from you feel personally, not that you're being like love bombed, like watch out for that. That's cult work right there. But just, you feel an oceanic sense of beauty, beautiful, loving kindness that you can dip into, like take a little dipper and take a drink of. And then everything's sitting pretty and you're on good, and you go forward from there. That's what I have to say, James Law.
So Loppon Yudron, it's been an honor to have you share with us and also to hear these precious names and be reminded. I hope this is the first of a number of talks or interviews, and I just want to say thank you on behalf of the communities for all of your support and encouragement and spotlighting all of these contemporary teachers. Even on social media, it's really brought so much attention. So I want to thank you again. And thank you for
You're very welcome. Thank you for this wonderful series you're doing on YouTube. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Loppon.